That which is of eternal significance is worth pursuing and protecting. Now, contending for the faith.
Hey friends, so delighted you've tuned in to your Contending for the Faith wherever you find yourself, and we have a very powerful story that you're about to hear a little bit about in this video, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment, all the way from Bulgaria.
To post now on Twitter that he got somebody resurrected. He's not there to justify his ministry or calling on this earth. He is so secure in his position because he's so high. He doesn't have to get low to tell everybody who he is. See, when you are low, you gotta justify your position to everybody else. But when you're high, you just walk in that authority. You just show up and the devils tremble. You don't have to tell the whole world who you are, you just are. The amazing part was Jesus died, he was resurrected, and he said, I am giving you the keys to my kingdom. Now go unlock the doors.
All right, unlocking the doors. I'd like to welcome all the way from Bulgaria via Seattle, Washington. Welcome to the set,
Thank you so much.
Ceitci Demirkova. Is that right?
Yes, very good.
I got it. It took me a while, but thank God. Well, they got a little sneak peek, but let's give a little bit of the backstory for our viewers that are watching,
Absolutely.
wherever they find themselves. You literally have contended for the faith on the front lines, but tell us a little bit about your journey, who God's made you to be, and growing up under communism, those kind of things.
Yes, so for the first 16 years of my life, I was in Bulgaria, central Bulgaria. We were under communism for 45 years, the whole nation. But I experienced just the first 16 years of my life in that dictatorship. And I have to say, as a person that didn't really know that there is anything else outside of that, I thought that it was just normal to live in a degraded type of society where you are literally removed from the idea of even dreaming or becoming someone influential. You have no dreams. The word dream didn't even exist. Also, growing up, I was very shy, very insecure, wanted to commit suicide by the time I was 11, 12, because I didn't think that there was any purpose to life. And for me, the Communist Party literally degraded people to such an extent that everybody is minimized and equalized to the dirt level. So it doesn't matter who you are and what kind of gifts and talents you may have, you have to worship the Communist Party. You had to do certain things that they demanded. So like, for example, I love to give this story.
Yeah.
We all had uniforms that we had to wear, so we all looked the same. And that's fine, because even today in different schools they have that. But we had to wear a blue tie from grade 1 through 3, showing that we're a part of the Communist Party. And then after 4th grade, until you graduate, you wear a red tie. And so it changes colors, but you have to have it at all times on you. It has to be ironed, it has to look perfect, and you cannot forget it. So every morning when we would walk into school, you were checked to see if you have your tie on, if it is ironed, because if it's not, they will send you back home. Also, your shoes had to be perfectly clean, and your hands and your nails had to be cut, and they had to be clean too. And so if any of those were missing, so the outward perfection that the Communist Party demanded of us was if you were not certain way and you did not look certain way, you were automatically removed, or somehow you had stigma over you that you were never going to be good enough. That's why we have a lot of orphanages in Bulgaria, because any child that was any different, or if it had any kind of dysfunction, automatically was placed in an orphanage. It was shame to the parents to have a dysfunctional child. And so for me, any kind of sign on the outside of imperfection was degradation, and it brought shame. But it wasn't just for me, it was for everybody else, but we didn't know any different.
Wow.
And so I think after all of these years of all of these things being built up, societies like this, they tend to have the outward perfection, but on the inside, people are dying.
Wow. That's incredible, Ceitci. And you know, one of the things is it teaches you that performance-based, and unfortunately, even in America, even in Christianity today, it's performance-based Christianity many a times. So here you are, you're 16 years old. So what happens at about 16? What was the turning point, if you will, in your life?
So right after communism fell, which was in 1989, right after the wall in Berlin fell, we were the first ones to really be affected. So Romania was the next country where communism fell, and then the rest of the European, Eastern European bloc, and then Bulgaria was a part of that. And it was for the first time in my life that we actually had exposure to the outside world outside of Russia. So we were able to get all of a sudden international news, to see how everybody else lived. We got humanitarian aid because at that time, the moment we disconnected our relationship with Russia from communism, they dropped off, they stopped supplying food, they stopped supplying electricity, water, just the essentials. So it created these big lines in the stores of just hours waiting for one loaf of bread or a little bit of sugar. So missionaries started coming in from different countries, especially from Europe, and delivering food. And so on my street, there was a German group that stopped. And at that time, I was studying German in the German high school in Bulgaria.
Wow.
They were lost. They didn't know where to go. And I was on the balcony, and somebody from the neighbors yelled at me and said, "Hey, come down here and help these people find their way back to the center of the city." Well, while I was downstairs, they decided to come up, and they had these big boxes of food. There were missionaries with various young people that were with them. They came to the house and they gave us chocolate and bananas and Eastern European acids that we had that were totally different than Western Europe. So chocolate and bananas were not very common. Oranges were not common at all. So it was the first time for me to see all of that. And I was so excited. So I started digging through the box in my excitement, and I found the Bible.
So they put a Bible in the box.
In the middle of all of the food.
And this is obviously when the wall had just come down, but still pretty brave to do, right, at that time?
Yeah, because we had never heard the gospel. I mean, until that time, we never celebrated Christmas, never celebrated Easter. The country was Eastern Orthodox or Greek Orthodox. However, we didn't celebrate anything that had to do with Christ. A lot of the Orthodox rituals were celebrated primarily by people that were actually Christians and believed. But in my family and in my relatives and the circle of people that I was in, nobody really celebrated any of that. Never heard that there is a God whose name is Jesus and that he actually loves me and has a plan for my life until that day.
That's incredible. So you get this Bible, you start understanding, and then what happens then?
Well, I started reading the book of Acts. So instead of really starting the way I was supposed to, I thought, oh, this is interesting, because persecution broke out in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And I needed to read something that was encouraging to see how everybody else lived. And for me, the book of Acts was something that I could relate to because the disciples were persecuted for their faith. And I thought that that's normal because there it was, a Bible that was written so many years ago and somebody else already lived that type of life.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is how everybody else lives for Christ under
Yeah.
persecution. And so for me, I would read every day how they would go, they would pray for the sick, God would heal them and do miracles. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be able
Wow.
to travel and to speak and preach the gospel because that seems pretty easy. And here I am, you know, so shy, so insecure because I thought nobody believes that I can do anything. So I think
Wow.
I can talk God into doing this. And then
Incredible.
I really felt like I was the one that talked God into it. I mean, obviously, he's the one with the plan.
Yeah.
But
He put the desire there, and he called you. So obviously he calls you, but he actually called you to America. When was that, and why was that?
so that was a year and a half later. So I turned 18, and I wanted to go and study in a Bible college by that time. So from 16 until 18, I was just reading the Bible, going to a small church in the area, and really believing that somehow I can get to a Bible college. There were no Bible colleges in Bulgaria. The closest one was Germany. Since I spoke German, I thought I'll just go in Germany.
It was around 1991?
Yeah, that was 92.
92,
Yeah,
okay.
92, 93. And so in Germany, however, they declined my application because they didn't have any money. And I thought, oh no, well, where am I going to go study? And at that time, missionaries from America came to my hometown.
Incredible.
And they were from Kansas, and they were going back to Victory Bible College in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
My hometown, good people there.
Yes, very good people. And they told me about the missions program, that they have various things that I could study there. And so I thought, wow, that would be a great place, except I have a problem. I can't speak English.
You can't speak English, and you're about to leave all your family behind, right?
Right. And so I thought to myself, it makes no sense that I studied German for 5 years and now I'd be going to the States where I haven't even spoken English for this entire time. And I left their house. I was excited, but I had a lot of questions. And so on the way, just walking distance from their house to my house, the Lord just put this desire in my heart, and I felt like he really spoke to me, and he said, the United States is where I want you to go. That's the place where you're going to be studying. And I said, well, I can't speak English, God. How am I going to get around? Like, how am I even going to study? And he said to me, you know, I speak all languages. I can give you an understanding to speak the language.
Wow.
And if you do obey me and if you do go, your family will come to know me. I will provide for all of your needs. I will open all of the doors for you to travel and to speak and preach. And I will give you supernaturally visa, and I will open the doors for you. And I thought, well, we got a deal. That seems easy. And you know, usually when God gives you the promise, he doesn't give you the details.
The journey.
The journey is a lot more difficult until you get to the promise.
Yes.
But I really left by faith. Just a few months later, I got supernaturally a visa. I learned English in a couple of months, and
2
I
months.
showed up here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And incredibly, it reminds me of the story of Abraham. Hebrews 11:8 says, Abraham went out by faith, not knowing where he was going. Paul, in Acts, says, I went bound in the Spirit, not knowing the trials that would await me. And but you had a call from God and said, I'm going to answer this call and step out by faith. Now, you get to America, you're 18, 19 years old, right?
Yep, I had just turned 19 at that time.
19 years old, and here you are in another country, don't know anyone, except you said, I'm going to go to Victory Bible Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you didn't have a scholarship or anything yet,
No,
right?
not
So
yet.
tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Well, first of all, when I did show up here, remember from communist days, we had no choices.
Right.
And everything was just one type of everything in the stores. So I show up, and the biggest gas station was Quick Trip that I first saw. And I thought that that was the biggest store. Can you imagine just my mindset, how many things had to be developed? Because
You're adjusting to culture.
choices, decisions that I had to make, everything was so overwhelming to me that my favorite saying at that time was, I was found in Jesus, but I was lost in the stores. I was literally scared of making decisions of what I wanted when I went into the store.
Wow.
I mean, now a lot of times has passed and I'm totally different. But even going back to school, everybody smiled and they looked in the eyes. In communist days, nobody smiled and nobody really looked in your eyes because it was disrespectful for you to look directly into the eyes of someone who was in authority over you. And so I always look down, and that's a part of the shame culture of how they precondition you to always look down and to be degraded. And so I had to raise my eyes, to lift up my head, to understand who I am really in Christ and the freedom that I have in Him. But it was a process. It was not an overnight. And I started believing every single day for my shoes, for my clothes, for my tuition. And when I did show up at Victory, everybody automatically found about me because I was the girl that did look like I had come out of communism and had nothing. And so the story just went around of this girl just showed up and we got to help her out.
Incredible.
Well, I have a lot of different stories, but I'll just share one of how I actually started just the survival process. Because every single day I was determined I was going to make it. And it wasn't just going to be a survival. I wanted to be a victor in the situation so that I can help other people overcome their insecurities or inabilities. And for me, I set a goal that by the time I was 20, I was going to start a nonprofit organization. So I had 1 year to get a lot of things developed, to meet a certain amount of people, and start a mailing list. And that was a part of what the school also encouraged us to do. Well, I didn't know anybody, so I went to Walmart, which is across the street from Oral Roberts University.
Yes.
And you know, back in those days, it was easy to go around and make friends.
Yes.
So I went around the aisles, met different people every day, and I brought a little piece of paper, and I would ask them for their name, address, and a phone number. And I would say, can I have all of those three and have you on my mailing list? Because one day I'm going to have a ministry, and I would love to share what I'm doing, but I just need help right now. And people really were very nice to me. They gave me their addresses and phone numbers, and I started with a mailing list with 50 random people I met on the streets at Quick Trip and Walmart. And that's how I started.
Incredible.
I had $50 in my hand from what was left from the 100, and I started supporting a child that was an orphan in Bulgaria with $1 a month.
Wow.
So that was 22 years ago.
And God always does more with less. And so I love that. Now you're a best-selling author. You've authored 5 books. And your latest book, Motivated by the Impossible. And it's impossible in an interview time with about 10 minutes left to tell your whole story, but it's fascinating. And I hope they get all your books. There's some of them there on the screen. Of course, they can go to your website. You do a lot with orphans. The sex slave industry is #1 in the world in Bulgaria, right?
Yes. Romania and Bulgaria are the top 2 countries for child trafficking. And so we work with a lot of kids in central Bulgaria, especially in the Roma neighborhoods and families that are predominantly selling their children into trafficking because they don't know what else to do. They think that they can find them a better lifestyle outside of Bulgaria. And so what we do is 2 things. One is getting the parents educated, getting the kids educated about trafficking, how to protect themselves, also enrolling them into school, being able to provide for their daily needs so that they don't feel like they have to go and prostitute themselves or beg on the streets for money, and also prevention of sometimes we battle, the rescue of a child. And so there is a lot that people can do for us besides prayer. They can come and visit, they can donate, they can help out in various ways, and we have information on our website.
So they can give safe and securely on your website.
Absolutely.
So Rick will put that up for our viewers. And then tell us about your latest project there. Motivated by the Impossible. Can they also purchase this
yes,
online
that
as
is
well?
also online, and it's also on Amazon. So
Recognizing
this book,
your invisible mentors
yes,
as well. Yes,
absolutely. Well, you know, it's been in my heart for 22 years to write the book, and I wrote the previous 4, but this one I left at this particular time in life because there are certain stories that certain part of my journey it had to be walked out. I couldn't just write about it in my earliest years when I was in my 20s or in my 30s. I had to write at a certain time in life when I had already experienced it, so that I'm on the other side of talking to people how to overcome impossibilities and not be afraid of facing painful situations. Because pain and trauma and heartache is going to happen. It's how are we going to face it, and how are we going to ask ourselves the right questions to give ourselves the right answers. And so the reason the undertitle says Recognizing Your Invisible Mentors is because every single problem in my life I viewed as a mentor. And so I take people on a journey of discovering their own mentors. So I don't give them mentorship program of identifying 10 mentors in these situations. I give them the principles so that they can identify their own mentors in their life in various situations. So all of the chapters, they include stories from my childhood experiences under communism that I have put in as analogies, and then they're connected with the biblical aspects and the principles combined with psychology. So I did a lot of research on all of this to be able to explain to people how our mind, our body, and our heart, our soul and spirit, they all work together.
Spirit, soul, and body. We're a 3-part being. That's right.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of times people live in disconnection. And so I talk about the integration of how do you bridge the gap between your past and your present and going into the future without dismissing all of the things that have happened in the past, but using them as stepping stones to where you can be and where you're going.
That's good.
And so I used stories from, for example, we had 152 stairs between my house and the bus station.
Stairs, okay.
Yes,
okay.
they were all stairs. It wasn't an elevator, and there were all various type of stairs. And so I identify them as the different layers of our life, and how the closest ones, the closest stairs to my house were the most broken up. They were ugly, they didn't look good, and yet those were the stairs that I played every single day.
Wow.
And so many times when we start off in life, our childhood experiences, they have a lot of cracks, but those are the things that made us, and they created our upbringing and our beliefs and our mindset. It's who we are. And if we are ashamed of those times in our life, then the rest of our life is going to be cracked, and it's going to be looked from that angle.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I bridge the gap so people can begin to look in those times that were painful and say, what can I find that was good? Looking back and connecting the dots to create a beautiful picture.
So good. And you know, for our viewers, Ceitci is available to speak, whether you wanted to speak at your conference. I love the fact that you speak in the marketplace, you speak in churches. This book and a lot of your books are designed not just for the faith-based audience, but also for the mainstream audience.
Yes.
And so I think being a bridge builder as you are, and using parables just like Jesus did to tell a story from a biblical worldview,
Yes.
it's definitely a way to engage people, and it's tremendous. I know God has more doors ahead of you. And again, if you want to connect with her, go to her website and find out information. Stand up and be counted and say, I want to help this lady that's helping orphans and least likely people that people write off. I know you have annual opportunities where people can get involved.
Yeah.
And they can learn more about that, how they can get
Absolutely.
involved, and how they can support. You are a 501c3
Yes.
tax-deductible organization, so it's just an opportunity for you to contend for the faith with somebody that's out on the front lines. You might not be able to be on the front lines like Ceitci is, but you're able to help her go and go into all the world. And you've answered that call over 20 years ago, and we just say, God bless you for doing that. What else can they learn from this latest book you've written here, Motivated by the Impossible, Recognizing Your Invisible Mentors?
Yes, well, you know, A lot of times people think that just because God has called them to do something is going to be an automatic answer to prayer, and the next day they're going to wake up and have everything just fall in place. And so for me, none of that happened. Even though I had all of the promises and God did provide for me, it was through different ways than I expected. So for example, early in the first 6 months of my stay in the States, I had to go on the corner of 71st and Lewis, right across the Praying Hands. And
Praying Hands on the campus of ORU, right?
Yes, except that this was on the other side of the street.
Yes.
And there was a bus that would come in and they would feed the poor people. And so for the longest time, I was ashamed of getting on that bus because I thought I live in the richest country in the world below the poverty level. And in Bulgaria, I was as poor as everybody else, so you didn't really feel that shame. But what happened is that day, I really prayed and I asked the Lord, why am I going through the process? And I knew that there is a journey in the middle of all of this, and that one day I'll be able to look back and connect the dots. And that day came a few years later when I was in Brooklyn, New York. I was riding on the bus with a Metro World child. It was
Bill Wilson's organization.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so there was a little boy that came on the bus with a messy hair, didn't have food. He was crying. By the end of the day, he was asking me to be his mom because his mom was on drugs. And as I am on the bus with him, all of a sudden, I just felt like the Lord connected all the dots for me. And that's when that title was really predominantly in my mind, motivated by the impossible and recognizing my invisible mentors. Because I recognized that the times when I was on the bus that fed me, I was on now the different bus that was feeding this little boy, but I would never have the same compassion and empathy for him if I had never been in his shoes. And so all of a sudden, those invisible mentors in my life were given purpose. And see, we can have a lot of painful things, but if we give them purpose, then they become our mentors. They become our stepping stones. And so that's how I have been able to overcome a lot of those impossibilities. And that's what I teach all of the readers how to do, so that they're never afraid of what they face. And you know, that little boy I have not seen since that day, but I know that there was something that was deposited in him, faith and assurance that he is going to be okay, that he is loved, because I told him, I know what it feels like, and I made it, and you're going to make it too. And a lot of times I believe people extract worthiness out of the need of somebody else. But when you have been in the shoes of someone who is in need, you are connecting to them because you know exactly how it feels. And you don't have to feel better about yourself by helping them. You're actually connecting with them, and out of that connection, you are helping somebody else. So that is the hands and the feet of Jesus, out of compassion and empathy.
So powerful. We've only got about 30 seconds.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, honored and a privilege. And again, get this book and make it a gift to somebody motivated by the impossible, recognizing your invisible mentors. Get the other books as well. Go to her website. Get connected to somebody that really is contending for the faith. And I'm reminded of the scripture. It says in 1 Corinthians 15:57 that he always leads us to triumph through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And maybe you're like Ceitci, you have a dream in your heart and you've been on the other side of the train track, so to speak, but don't get off on the wrong pit stop, on the wrong bus stop. Stay connected to the vine and be his branch. Again, thank you for standing up and being counted. We are honored and privileged. And thank you, friend, for tuning in to Your Contending for the Faith, wherever you find yourself. Until next week, same time, same place. We'll see you soon.